name is Christine.
Oh.
Well, hey, you have your drink? Okay.
I'll show you mine.
I made one.
Very cool.
I improvised a little bit.
They're delicious.
Same thing as Thomas's.
Mm-hmm. Well, y'all are among the first here.
Do we get to answer again?
Yes, but if other people turn up, you have to let them answer too.
Yeah, we'll mute our microphone for a while, okay?
Yeah. Good
So we
idea.
gotta let other people have a turn.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, I don't know.
Lauren, we see that you joined on. We're glad you're here.
There we go. All right. Hey guys.
Hi. Thanks so much.
Hi.
For
I'm excited. P texted me like a half hour ago, so I quick finished up dinner, and yeah, this is exciting.
Very cool. Well, we're just gonna wait a couple minutes. A few more people are hopping on. There's Paul Van Bremen. Hi, Paul. Hi, Julie. We're glad you're here.
Hi. Yeah, we're on.
Yeah,
All right.
virtual back.
Good to see you. We're just giving people a couple minutes to hop on.
I couldn't get on via the link. I had to use the meeting ID. The link said it was the 17th.
Yeah, we're still to the first session.
Oh, goodness. Okay. I wonder if we should. Yeah, I don't know.
I sent it out, the email
Okay.
for everybody to get on there.
So it would be the most recent email.
Yeah, if they want to use that.
Okay. Okay, well, we'll give people just a little bit more time because it's just now a little bit after 5.
Morning.
These are all like.
Well, and because we rescheduled, and I don't know if I was supposed to regenerate or not.
The stairs.
I mean,
Wow. Wow.
Right. And Christine.
Oh, I like it.
I'm gonna mute us.
Right. Well, while we're waiting, I do want to be respectful on everyone's time. I do just want to say hello and thank you so much for joining us for the second installment of Cocktails with the Collection, which is kind of a new concept. Want to make sure that everybody can hear me okay? Thumbs up if you can hear okay. Okay.
Laura,
Okay, great. Well, if you can't hear me, just drop us something in the chat bar and we'll try to reconcile any technical difficulties that we have. And for those of you who I don't know, I'm John Carpagno, and I always tell people I have the greatest job in the world, and that is that I get to be the executive director of North Carolina's second oldest art museum. So we have missed seeing everybody so much with everything that 2020 has brought and us having to be shut down. We are so, or at least to have our doors shut. Our mission has certainly continued throughout the quarantine and all that we've been dealing with. And we decided that the best thing that we could do would be to find ways to build bridges with our audience and with our fan base. This is kind of one of the first programs that we've done to get that going. So I'll invite everybody back. We know the date now. when the gate will be open again. That's October the 1st. So I invite you to come and see us in real life. We look forward to catching up. Everything will be socially distant and safe. And the galleries, I can tell you, will look absolutely spectacular when you come. And what we're going to do tonight is we are going to continue our exploration of the And I Need Your Station Wagon exhibition, which has been installed in the Paul Whiteman Gallery. We're not there today because with everything we're learning with the technology, and we're also learning about motion detector lights. And one of the things that we experienced last time was if you sit still too long down there, it goes dark for a minute and then you have to wave your arms like a crazy person to get them to turn back on. So we moved the paintings upstairs tonight, and when you come back, many of them will be on view downstairs. So I'm joined tonight by our producer for the evening, Debbie Reed, our communications and design manager. You can see her hand there again, and we just want to have a little bit of fun with you. So I asked Debbie to pull up the first image on screen share. And you all will be treated to a much more handsome museum director than our current occupant of that role. Here is our founding director, Paul Whitener, our legendary founding director. And last week, we recounted how Paul hauled back a bounty of some real treasures from a 1954 auction at the Coleman Galleries in New York City. We learned about how the museum's early board member, Laura Lee Wilbaugh, generously loaned Paul the equivalent of $10,000 of today's dollars to go shopping at that auction. And really, what she was doing, what we feel so fortunate, was setting the stage for people to enable the growth and continued development of Paul's great museum here in Hickory. We feel very fortunate that a lot of people are following and Laura Lee Wilbaugh's footsteps today. So next slide, please, Debbie. I think you got to scroll down with the mouse. There it is. Okay. So one of the things that we even got to see last time around was a pretty close facsimile to the 1954 green Dodge straight rear station wagon that Laura Lee Wilbaugh shared with Paul in order to ensure that he'd have enough room to get all those paintings back to their new home here in Hickory. So you can picture Paul having just seen his photo behind the wheel of a mean green machine just like that one, filled with carefully packed paintings, some of which are right behind me right now. I just think that it's so cool that we're able to share this story and do it together over a drink. So while you're looking at a car and thinking about a car, I will ask you, are you enjoying tonight's curated cocktail, the Bacardi Sidecar? I have one and it's absolutely delicious. And it's like I said last week, and like I always say, looking at great art is a lot like enjoying a cocktail. It's always better when you do it with a friend. And so I'm dressed kind of casual today, and we really want this to have the vibe that you're hanging out with friends at your favorite art museum. So I encourage you, if you feel comfortable to do so, turn your screen on so we can see one another. And when a question pops up, feel free to answer. I'm fortunate I get to have the real thing right behind me, but Debbie has a slide deck, so you'll be able to see the paintings up close and personal. And really, let's just have some fun hanging out with great art and hanging out together. Next picture, please. So there's the Bacardi Sidecar. I've tried to pick ones that the ingredients were pretty easy to get to. And I tend, if you haven't picked up on it now after 2 weeks, to skew toward drinks that have rum in them. And Debbie, you can put the next one up too. And I'll remind everybody, just like I did last week, if your first few snips of the Bacardi sidecar are not to your liking, you can honor Paul Whitener by switching over to a hot toddy. So I feel very fortunate. This program has brought me into contact with a lot of people that had firsthand experience with Paul. And Julie Klein, who was on this call tonight, reminded me that the hot toddy was Paul's favorite drink. So like I said, if you don't like the sidecar, switch over to that. And I'll ask, before we jump in, that we can raise a glass to Paul and to Hickory Museum of Art as we now have a little bit of fun learning about some of the history behind all the stuff that is here with us tonight. So next slide, please. I mentioned in 1954, Paul went shopping at an auction at the Coleman Galleries, and he brought back these paintings that are here behind me. He had gotten wind from his friends in the New York art world, for instance, Wilford Conroe, that George A. Zabriskie had passed away, and that George A. Zabriskie had a great collection of art that was going to be auctioned, and you kind of need to get there to bring these paintings back to Hickory. And you can see this portrait by George Zabriskie that you're looking at was actually painted by Wilford Conroe. So it gives a sense of the relationships that Zabriskie had in New York City that helped him to amass what was really a great collection of art. And Zabriskie is one of those names that is the stuff of legend around Hickory Museum of Art. Staff talks about the Zabriskie auction all the time, and that one's a good one. It's a Zabriskie painting. And we never really knew too much, though, about George Zabriskie until we installed this exhibition and launched into these programs that we've been doing around the show. So he was actually a really interesting guy, and I can tell you a little bit more about him by way of some of the tributes that accompanied his passing right around 1954. So we know that George Zabriskie was the descendant of early Polish settlers and a native of New York City. He was born in December of 1868. He attended public schools where he did really well. He was great. He had a charismatic student, and he entered into the flower business in 1883, eventually rising to the ranks to become the regional representative or the regional kind of general manager of the Pillsbury Baking Company. So the Pillsbury Doughboy, that was George Zabriskie, and he was pretty high up on the food chain in that big, big organization. So you know he was wealthy, he was successful, and he was making connections. Some of those connections brought him into contact with Herbert Hoover, who appointed him the National Administrator of Sugar and Flour. And by way of this role, he was decorated by Belgium, Iceland, and Poland. And after the war, he became the director of the Columbia Baking Company and president of the United States Sugar Association. So sugar made Zabriskie a really wealthy man and also allowed him to become a collector of art. He really liked books, hand-bound manuscripts, and he also became pretty interested in the nonprofit world, especially as it related to history. So eventually, on top of everything that he's doing in his business life, he becomes the president of the New York Sons of the Revolution and the New York Historical Society. And this painting that you're looking at of George Zabriskie by Wilbur Conroe is actually in the collection of the New York Historical Society and probably dates to right around the time he was president of their board. Mr. Vail at the Historical Society in a memorial tribute recalled, Zabriskie was always a delightful gentleman. We found him to be kind, considerate, and a helpful boss. And by way of everything he did there, he got a couple more honors, including being elected to the American Antiquarian Society. So then he was in New York, and then he went national with the American Antiquarian Society. And this is what they remembered of having him on the board. Although we could never get him to actually come to a meeting, we found him to be a loyal and generous friend. So again, he kind of speaks into the charisma and charm that he brought to everything that he did. He spent most of his later years in his winter home in Florida at Ormond Beach. And that was actually where he was when he passed away. He was unmarried and survived by his brother. So when he passed, that art collection really didn't have anywhere to go other than to his brother and then to auction. And another interesting note was he had some pretty famous pallbearers at his funeral, including Herbert Cooper. So this is where things get even more interesting. Debbie, if you could show the next slide. Anybody who knows me knows, and you can probably pick up from my accent, I'm from New Jersey. And I remember traveling up to hockey games on the Palisades Parkway. And if you look out the window of your car when you're running around Alpine, so if you're heading to the Men in Ice Arena or any of the rinks up there, when you look out your window, you can see the remnants of George Zabriskie's other home, his summer home, which are still visible off of the Palisades Parkway. So can you make out in these two photos, you can see there are 4 windows stacked on top of one, or a pair of windows stacked on top of one another, 4 windows behind the tree. Can you see that? And the one on the right. Okay. Now, Debbie, you should show the next slide. You see those 4 windows again? They're covered in ivy, and they have a big deck on top of them now. This is George Zabriskie's summer home, Cliffdale. And Cliffdale was located on what they call Millionaire's Row, overlooking the Hudson River. And one of the things that's kind of interesting about this home, on top of how beautiful it is that it was actually the nearby George Washington Bridge that ended up being the source of its demise. When the George Washington Bridge opened up, what ended up happening was the Interstate Commission acquired the properties around it, overlooking the Hudson River, and demolished everything that was on it to restore green spaces. So all that remains are those ruins that we saw. But then if you could show the next slide. This is the inside of the house. So you can kind of imagine, if you look in the back by the columns, there are paintings on easels. You can begin to imagine what it would have been like that our paintings from Hickory Museum of Art may very well have been in the next room over. And my goodness, it certainly is a lavish place to call home, isn't it? So this gives a little bit of a sense, like I said, of George Zabriskie, the millionaire, the board member, the charitable giver of his time, and kind of joyful friend that also gave pretty unique Christmas gifts. So Debbie, can you go to the next slide, please? The whole idea for cocktails from the collection actually derives from something really cool that George Zabriskie used to do for his friends. Instead of giving them the types of presents that, are mass produced or something like that, he would actually create specially bound books just for them. And in 1948, he gave out this book called The Bon Vivant's Companion. And that was the Christmas gift that he gave. So if you can't read it, what the introduction says under the title is that this book contains directions for how to mix beverages, compiled by his friends for George Zabriskie. And he did that from the winter home. You can see it says that on the bottom there, compiled in Florida from the winter home. And there is actually a cocktail in that book called the Zabriskie. And I thought about dusting that one off for this program. But one of the things about Zabriskie is evidently he loved gin. And recipes with gin are a recipe for disaster with your current museum director. So that's why we ended up with the party site. So hopefully everybody feels like we know George Zabriskie a little bit better, having done this a little bit of background. And now I'd love for us to look at some of the paintings that he used to own, which are now in the collection at the Hickory Museum of Art. So Debbie, can you open up the next picture? That's Joe Costigan. He is the artist that created this painting right here behind me. And one of the things that changed from last week to this week is is my hair. I don't know, for those that were on the call last week, I had the cool Costigan hair. And now I went back to something a little bit more, I guess, professional looking, but I thought you had to see Costigan to believe him. And just that he had such a cool look. Debbie, we can see the picture behind me in the next. So now it's the part where, like I said, turn your mic up. Let's talk a little bit of art. And I would be curious, looking at this painting on your screen, what title would you give to it? What title would you give to this painting?
The Three Nymphs.
The Three Nymphs? I like it. Okay. So
Maybe the three people.
what did you say?
Maybe the three people.
So the three people are the three nymphs. So we've identified there are three figures in this picture. Okay. What do you think they're doing?
They're bathing, I think.
You think they're bathing? Okay, what makes you say that, Paul?
Well, probably because the clothes are kind of, to the front of them, and it looks like one of them is bathing the young. I don't know if it's boy or girl, but yeah.
Okay. So it looks like their clothes are kind of half on, and one of them appears to be bathing the figure in the center. Okay. What emotions do you read into a picture like this one?
I thought there was something to
How do you think they feel being in this picture?
happy.
Do you think they're happy? Okay, what makes you say that?
Cause I think they're swimming.
Because you think they're swimming. Okay.
Yeah.
And when you're swimming together, that makes you happy. Okay, so we have that they're bathing, they're swimming, they seem to be happy with one another. You know, what is interesting to me is if you look at the facial expression of the boy in the center, how do you think he feels? Can you make it out on your screen?
I think he's cold.
You think he's cold? Yeah, that's something that I picked up on. You know, it does seem like these figures are very comfortable with one another, and it definitely does feel that they are in various states of undress. But yeah, the little boy seems to have a kind of funny look on his face, and I kind of read it almost as if he's grimacing or his teeth are chattering. And I was wondering, is he crying or is he cold? And, I don't know that I have a definite answer for it, but I do think it sure is delightful to get to spend a little bit of time at least thinking about all of this. So, like I said, we're spoiled. We can see exactly kind of the bright blue eyes that he has and the way that they're kind of looking down. And you can see the figure next to him is certainly giving him a degree of care and attention. And one of the coolest things about doing these programs and preparing for them is that instead of looking at spreadsheets and policies, I've actually got to look at some art and learn a little bit about the art. And in researching for this painting, I found a letter from 1982 by the artist's son, Daniel Costigan. And what Daniel said when he wrote to the museum is, incidentally, if I correctly read the date below the signature of the bathers as 1932, I was undoubtedly the model for the blonde youngster. So that little guy at the center with his chattering teeth and his kind of downtrodden eyes is actually Daniel Costigan, the artist's son. And for those of you who thought they were swimming, they certainly are. The painting is called The Bathers. And it's just kind of neat to see Costigan portraying his family in this moment of being together out in nature. And another letter that came 5 years later, Daniel describes, that kid is me. I was born in February of 1929. So the boy in the center would have been about 3 years old. And he confirmed in a letter to the museum that this tender scene of family life was actually on the screen in the family farm. So that's kind of another cool data point. So John Costigan, how did he get to that farm? And how did he get to a point in 1932 where he was painting his family in a brilliant, kind of dazzling watercolor in this tender, fun moment together? He was born in Providence, Rhode Island, and he was orphaned at age 18. So he moved to New York City in 1906 to live with his uncle. His uncle was a pretty famous guy. His uncle was George Cohan, who was better known for Get My Regards to Broadway and Yankee Doodle Dandy. So when he was in New York, he got involved kind of in the art, theater, bohemian scene, but he was pretty much self-taught as an artist. He began making theater posters for the H.C. Minor Company for his uncle's productions, and sketching and hanging out at a place called the Kit Kat Club, which was where all the cool artists, bohemian, and theater people hung out together. By 1910, his talent at this was recognized, and he began running in the circles of art world elites. And those of you who know our collection know that Paul assembled some of the best in terms of who was making art in the New York art world at the time when Paul was collecting. So we also have a great painting from William Merritt Chase, not in this show, because it wasn't as a Zabriskie painting. But the connection between Chase and Costigan is that for a little bit, Costigan was William Merritt Chase's student, but it didn't end well. Chase was somebody that really privileged technique and formalism over expression, so they butted heads like oil and water for the time that they were together. But that didn't really slow Costigan down. By 1916, his work was exhibited at the Corcoran Galleries in DC, and things were going really well. But something happened for him. Right as his star was rising, he was shipped off to World War I, where he served on the front lines as an infantryman. So it's kind of hard to imagine that while he was fighting on the front lines in World War I, paintings like the one behind me that he had created before he left were actually hanging in the National Academy of Design's annual show. So you can imagine also that he witnessed some horrible atrocities and kind of the brutalism of war firsthand, and that had a yearning for a more peaceful life upon his return. So Debbie had a call. My hunch is from a participant trying to get in. So I'm going to come around here and show you the next picture. If I can get to it. Oh, I'm going the wrong way, aren't I? So this is the theme, never ask a museum director to do technology. All right, just a second. Go back to the beginning. Oh. Hang with me. I promise it's cool. Let me get there. I'm just about there.
Now we got a little Christine.
Oh, good. We have a participant joining in.
Awesome.
All right. Hey, Christine. We're so glad you're here.
And the pictures.
All right, and we're going to go back to the pictures just a sec. We're just welcoming Christine onto the call here. There's an influx.
I got it. Now, where's the video? Or where's the sound?
I see you.
We can hear you.
Christine, can you hear us? think Christine is on, we hope. She's such a good participant last week. We're so glad she's here. All right, and Debbie, can we scroll back down? I went the wrong direction. And we'll want to get forward, forward, forward. All right, excellent, please. There we go. All right. So where we left off, John Costigan had just gotten back from World War I, and he was looking for a more peaceful way of life. So what he does is he moves to Orangeburg, New York, where he buys his own farm, and he takes one of his friends from his days at the Kit Kat Club with him, his wife, to be Ida Blessing. And here you can see her. She was a model and a dancer at the Kit Kat Club before she moved with John Costigan to their new farm in Orangeburg. And if you can see on the picture, she actually has a spinning wheel behind her. And it is kind of a return out of the city and the hustle and bustle of New York to the more pastoral life together. And you can also see that the house is a pretty nice house. It's got those big windows, and the spinning wheel certainly wasn't cheap. And despite the fact that he was largely self-taught as an artist and had only a 6th grade education, his art provided him a really comfortable lifestyle up there at the family farm. And we'll scroll ahead to the next picture. This painting actually reflects a lot of what made Costigan's life so comfortable and so successful in Orangeburg. So in 1932, this painting won the Zabriskie Prize at the American Watercolor Society's annual competition. So I think that gives a sense not only of George Zabriskie's great eye, but also Paul Weichner's great eye in acquiring this painting from the museum. And it was even exhibited at the North Carolina Museum of Art in 1967. So it's a painting that has kind of been sought after and really reflects a lot of what makes Costigan such a special painter. So undoubtedly, when this painting won the award at the American Watercolor Society exhibition in 1932, the club's president would have been there. And the club's president was his good friend, George Pierce Innes, who we also have some paintings in our collection by. And George Pierce Innes was quoted as saying of Costigan's work, "If you are looking for the drama of nature, spontaneity of mood, the mystery or the sense of relief that space gives, you will find these in Costigan. His world is uniquely that of an artist, a world where color is dominant, where it fills the air in the sparkle of spring rain." So as we're enjoying a cocktail together, I don't know about you, but I have had a string of the most 2020 type weeks that a person could have in a row. And it's just been absolutely crazy and somewhat stressful. So I'm going to leave this slide up for just a moment and allow everybody to enjoy a drink while we take a look at it. So take a sip of the party sidecar and let's slip into Costigan's world for a minute. That place that is filled with spontaneity, color, and the sparkle of spring rain. I think you will find that it feels really, really good to do that. So just go get it. What do you think? Good? All right. So we have another watercolor in the show that has been getting so many questions and also so much praise. Maybe if you could put it up. Can you all see it on your screen okay?
Yes.
Well, I'll ask the question. What do you think is happening in this picture? Describe this picture a little bit.
The Addams family went on vacation.
The Addams family went on vacation?
It looks like
Okay.
Well, I thought it was a scene from Psycho. I was expecting to see a dead mom's body at the window there.
Okay, so you almost expect to see a dead body hanging in the window.
Well, yeah, from Psycho. That looks like the house from the movie Psycho.
Oh,
But obviously there's a storm.
Okay, so it looks like it's the house behind the Bates Motel. It looks like there's a storm. What makes you say that?
Dark clouds.
The dark clouds rolling in for sure. There's a lot of movement. It appears in those clouds. RCA kind of shows you some light. So there is the clouds rolling in around the light. Okay. All right. How would you describe the location?
Where does it look like it is?
It looks like it's in a cold place.
It looks like it's in a cold place.
Yeah, because the grass is blowing.
Okay. So there's a lot of grass there, and the grass appears like it's blowing, so it might be a cold place. And
It looks on top of a hill.
It looks like it's on a haunted hill.
Yeah.
For sure. And
Yeah. Good feedback.
how does the artist create this movie? Haunting, being on a hill, it's cold there, it looks like a storm is coming in.
Good Lord.
I think one way he does it is certainly the color choices. And I think
Pop up on your picture.
Really?
Yeah.
I thought I had my video turned off.
See? Audio turned on.
And we're gonna try to control that feedback just a little bit. We talked a little bit about the clouds and the movement of the clouds, the kind of the play of light and dark. So there certainly is a mood around this picture. And what we have found is that whenever people walk into the Paul Whiteman Gallery and they look around, this is a painting that they can't take their eyes off. Kind of people gravitate toward it and they just want to spend time with it. And everybody does pick up on all the things that we've been talking about. That, you know, that the house looks like the Bates Motel, looks like it's a haunted place. You can imagine. I've heard people wonder, did somebody die there? And that's why the house looks like it's abandoned. And then, you know, the brushwork and the movement of the kind of wind blowing the grass and the clouds. These are all things that people just find arresting. And they look to see who painted that. And that's kind of a great mystery, because when you read the name Joseph William Arcier, a lot of people don't recognize it. I certainly didn't. And this is my wheelhouse for American art history. This is the period that I really like. So one of the things that happens when you get a former art historian, or I guess an art historian still, who is a big nerd, an assignment and too much time, anything can happen. And I was able to track down a little bit more about this painting, and I can tell you some things that people likely had never heard about it. So the author of it, Joseph William Arcier, isn't a household name like Thomas Hart Benton or John Stewart Curry or Paul Whitener or any of the other people. Because of his own talent, he's actually better known as a really, really successful manufacturing executive. And when you Google him, that's what you get. He died in 1973 in the Westport, Connecticut area. And one of the things about him was that as good a painter as he was a pretty smart guy. He went to the Wharton School of Business, which is kind of where he cut his teeth, and eventually worked his way up to vice president, kind of C-suite level executive for the Craig Freely clothing company. And if you Google Craig Freely, you can see they actually had some pretty cool designs. So how I found all this out, he did paint, and he was another Zabriskie Award winner at the American Watercolor Society show. This one won the award in 1950. Zabriskie died, he awarded this painting that award. And again, I think just another great reflection of the great eye that Whitener and Zabriskie shared for painting. So Craig Greeley, a manufacturing company, was in New York, and he commuted in from Westport area, and he painted to get his work in the shows, but he was really thinking more about his business life. But he gave his paintings away as gifts, and I found he gave one to the Westport School District, and that was actually a key that unlocked some of the doors that got me thinking about what this painting may actually be about. There is a sticker on the back of it that says the title of the painting is The End of an Era. And as we walk through a little bit more on the painting, think about what that title might be. So Debbie, if you could show the next slide, Julie gets to take an extra sip of her cocktail. Because if you look, that is the Bates Motel behind, or the house behind the Bates Motel is actually the same period of architecture that this painting reflects. It's called the Second Empire style, and the name comes from the reign of Louis Napoleon, which lasted from 1852 to 1870. And there's a clue, there's a hint that lets you know if something is a Second Empire style building. And it's actually the steeply sloped roof that you can see really well on the Bates Motel house. And then you can also see it in this painting. And why they did that, that roof is called a mansard roof, named after Francois Mansard, the artist or the architect that first started doing it. And he created this steeply sloped roof to give you more room in an attic, to make it more of a usable space. And then usually there's a dormer window, and you can kind of pick up the window on the top, on the tower of the Bates Motel house, which gives a little bit more light, again, to make the space more usable. Stephanie, if you show the next slide. The Second Empire style really got big in America following the Civil War, and it remained popular throughout the 1880s. And this is where things got really interesting for the nerd in me, because I started to ask, why would Arcier, if he was painting in the 1950s, be painting Second Empire style homes that would have been popular more in the 1880s? So then I started Googling Second Empire in Westport, and this is what I found out. Westport in the 1870s and 1880s was perfectly situated to be a great place to grow onions. In fact, the farmers in Westport, Connecticut supplied the Union Army with their onions. And as a result, they became really, really wealthy. The farms prospered, and by way of that, the wealthy farmers began building houses that were state-of-the-art and stayed in the style. So in Westport, Connecticut, there are actually tons of Second Empire houses, just like the one that you're looking at there on the screen. And so, it's not surprising that if Arcier was living in Westport, he'd be seeing Second Empire architecture. But again, something always happens. In the 1890s, there was a cutworm infestation that wiped out the onion farms, and all the agriculture moved to the Midwest. So could this building in the Arcier painting be one of those onion farms that was wiped out in the 1890s when the worms came and kind of ruined the money train that was happening there? And Arcier, being up in that neck of the woods, seeing it, decided to paint it. And could that be the end of the era that we're talking about? What do y'all think on that? Do you have any questions? Did that make sense? Because to me, I found it absolutely fascinating And it did kind of answer some of the questions that I had about this painting. Number one, who was it that created it? Number two, where could it be? What could have happened there? Or, you know, who knows, maybe it wasn't an old onion farm in a field. Maybe somebody really did die there. And maybe that's why it was abandoned, which is certainly a more romantic story. But nonetheless, it is a great painting, and I encourage you to come in and take a look at it. And in the meantime, Debbie, if you could show the next slide. If you need your fix of the Second Empire architecture style, you can do that right here at Hickory. The Probst House, which the Landmark Society has maintained, is a great reflection of Second Empire style right here in our own backyard. And you can go and see their mansard roofs and their dormer windows. And I do owe a debt to Patrick from the Landmark Society, who kind of, when we looked at this painting together, said if you want to answer some questions, start thinking Second Empire. So that's kind of fun to be able to dive in with a friend and learn something about it. Okay, I have one more to show you. And that is this one here, Lake Louise Iowa Podcast. And again, I'll ask you, what are some things that stand out or are interesting to you about this painting?
The green reflection on the, is it water below?
Uh-huh. So you like the reflection of shadows on the water below?
That green hue that gets kind of picked up, I guess, from the sky and the trees. It's just interesting, kind of seems really bright and almost like out of place compared to all of the like warm oranges of the rock next to it.
Right on. And that green water is striking, isn't it? And if you look, you can kind of see there is a lot of green that could be picking up in the reflection, but you don't see too much of what surrounds it. Okay? And that's
Well, I've been to Lake Louise, and it sometimes looks very aqua because glacial water comes into that, and glacial. In fact, I've hiked in that very same scene around where the trees are. So that sometimes is how the water appears in the entire lake.
And it sounds absolutely beautiful. I've never made it up that way, but you know, the artist is kind of processing what he's seeing in this place and translating it onto the canvas, and that's a great effect, I think.
It feels kind of like it's coming in on you, but also vast at the same time.
Whoa, is that
You gonna get dinner ready?
So
But, you know, pick yourself.
there's kind of a push and pull.
Yeah, like there's the cliffs that feel like, or mountains feel like they're, and those trees coming in on you, but then that light in the background feels very vast.
And you know,
And in reality, it's a huge lake. That's just a little corner of it.
So Lake Louise is an expansive lake, and the way that your eyes see space there is different. And you know, I kind of do pick up on that push and pull and like I said, I get to be face to face just with it. And I know from the study of artists that went out to the West, to the American West and the Canadian West, that one of their biggest challenges was being able to process how the eye saw space. And I think a lot of that is there are these big peaks. There are colors that are different than the colors that you see on the East Coast. The Podhas, Cincinnati born or Ohio born artist who makes his way to New York City, where he's running in the National Academy of Design circles. All of a sudden, he's out west and he's trying to process what he's sees. And what is interesting about Podhas, you may remember from our Elliot Dangerfield exhibition that we did just a few years back, that Podhas had a little bit of experience.
We'll go outside. Go outside if you want.
he went 1910 to the Grand Canyon with Elliot Dangerfield and was sent there by the Santa Fe Railroad to do paintings of that landmark. And then he was fortunate that he got to go out west again in 1913 and to go through Montana and up into the Lake Louise area. And he certainly did paint an awful lot. And, you know, this painting was initially called Along the Beach. And to Julie's point, Lake Louise is a giant lake. So there are a lot of different vantage points that one could have. And there are a lot of different places where you could stand on the beach and paint. And it got this title, Lake Louise, on the beach. Eventually it changed to Lake Louise. And when the title changed was actually when we saw a painting from a 1969 catalog at the Chapelier Galleries that had that title. And so, you know, our team updated the designation, said, you know, on the beach, parenthetically likely Lake Louise. But again, this is one of those things you can't let a nerd loose with great art because you start to find other stuff. So Debbie, if you could show the next slide. In researching for this picture, I found out about this painting. It's called In the Far Northwest in Montana. It's also from 1913, and it's not too far away. It's in Chattanooga, Tennessee. And the curator at the Hunter Museum wrote to us and said, why are you calling that painting Lake Louise? It's clearly in Glacier National Park in Montana. It looks just like our painting. Look, there are some similarities. I think you may want to look at the title. Here's where it gets interesting again. Then we get to the next slide. Here's another painting that I found, getting ready for tonight. It is called Lake in the Canadian Rockies. It's in the Gilcrease Museum in Tulsa, Oklahoma. And, you know, it looks eerily similar to the painting that I have right next to me. So Debbie, can you show all three together? All right. Here's another kind of funny thing that happened while I was researching for this painting. Another curator wrote to us. She was putting together a show in Cincinnati, which is not surprising because that's Potthast neck of the woods. He's a favorite son in that part of the world. And said, wait a second, isn't that painting that you have from 1910 when we went to the Grand Canyon? So we have a couple different locations for where the seed might be. And I'd be super curious to hear from you all what you think the answer is. Well, where this painting is actually depicted.
I need to go pull out my photographs of Lake Louise and look at that corner of it.
Uh-huh. Okay. We do.
Thomas blew through and he saw it and he goes, whoa, is that the Grand Canyon?
So he sides with the curator in Cincinnati. He thinks it's the Grand Canyon. But he's only ever been to Michigan, New Jersey, Boston, and Florida. So we don't know. Okay. So here is what I think may be happening with, you know, we talked a little bit about the color choices, especially the play of light and shadow on the water in the foreground here. And we also talked a little bit about the push and pull of planar recession. And so, you know, as you move back into space, the different planes, the way that Potthast is portraying the light, create kind of an unsettling effect. But there are some things that are common to all three of these paintings. For instance, the formation of the trees, the fact that there is a big kind of snow-covered peak behind, peeking out from behind that one, I guess, rocky outcropping, and then there are all of those trees in the foreground. There's no bush in the Hickory Museum of Art one, but there is one. So I think what may be happening, Potthast is showing us by way of his visual language, right? The fact there isn't a single black outline in the Hickory Museum of Art painting. So that's like a hallmark of the Impressionist style, right? The push and pull dynamics of spatial reception are another hallmark of the Impressionist style. And last, but certainly not least, the focus on light and the play of light and shadows, another dead giveaway that somebody is thinking about Impressionists. And one of the things that Impressionists were notoriously known for is going to the same spot at different times during the day and painting how light and color look differently during those times. So Monet did it at the Cathedral of Rouen. His Haystacks similarly did that, where it looked at a subject at different times during the day. And I think that may actually be what we're experiencing here with Hothouse. And so I tend to land on this idea that it is in fact Lake Louise in 1913, and that the three different scenes reflect him returning to a somewhat similar spot and capturing these different elements in a document. So that's kind of where I landed on with that. But again, just a really interesting and different look at a painting that is unquestionably one of the gems of the museum's collection, and a painting that has been beloved and kind of exhibited many times since it came to our collection in 1954. So we have just a couple of minutes left together. I do want to ask if anybody has any questions or anything you want to add to our conversation.
Yeah, if it works.
We have a comment from Pete. He said, I think he was a genius. He was able to convince 3 different areas that he was painting their lake.
Yeah, he was good like that. Yep. I think maybe it is that the paintings are so good that everybody wants to believe it's where they're from and it's their lake. I think that's where I landed on with that one. Anybody else have any questions or anything you want to add to our exploration of the Zabriskie auction and the important role that it's played in the history and growth of our collection? Well, I will tell you that I really appreciated last Friday morning when I came in. I had heard from a couple of people that they really enjoyed the first installment of this program. And those emails made my day going into the weekend. So I'm so glad.
I'm having a hard time hearing.
That some of you have chosen to return for week 2. And my hope is that you all will continue to keep an eye out on what we're doing with virtual programs coming up. And also, if you're a museum member, that keep an eye out for your membership renewal. And Debbie has done a great job of preparing our annual fund materials, which are coming up. We're not going to ask you to contribute right away, but we do hope that you'll consider helping to sustain the vibrancy and momentum that have defined everything that's happening at the museum right now. Like I said, we hope to see you real soon on October 1st or shortly thereafter, because the galleries are great. And as fun as this was, being able to look at the reproductions together, enjoy a drink together, there's nothing better than being together in person. So, thanks so much, everyone, and hope to see you soon.
Thank you, John.
Bye-bye.
Enjoyed it. Thank you.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Yep.